Welcome to Roll to Save, the RPG history podcast, Star Wars.
Hi, and thanks for downloading Roll to Save's Star Wars Roundtable discussion. Very short introduction here because, by way of an apology, the sound quality is a little bit off in this episode. It wasn't until we'd finished recording that I noticed that my son playing Fortnite in the room next door to the office was picked up on the mic. So if you hear what sounds like World War III taking place, that's what it is. Anyway, on with the podcast. Hope you enjoy it.
A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away.
Welcome to this episode, our Star Wars Roundtable discussion. As usual, I have Jason and Steve with me. How are you doing, gents?
Good, mate. Going a bit stir-crazy, locked away, not allowed out, getting loads of jobs done in the house, which I guess is pleasing the missus. Otherwise, okay.
Absolutely, but what better of a time to be recording a podcast and talking about old-school role-playing games than when we're stuck in the house? So I guess I'm doing not too bad overall, you know.
And we've also got another guest with us. We've got Wes. Wes, this is your first time on this podcast, but obviously not first time on a podcast. You're a bit of a veteran at this.
Yeah, I did a podcast for about 5 years, all talking about geeky stuff, mainly TV and games and movies related stuff. But yes, I've got a history with role playing as well, so I'm guessing that's why you've roped me into this.
No, it's just for your dulcet tones and your good nature. But tell us, how did you get roped into role-playing in the first place?
So I guess it started at secondary school, early on in secondary school. So I must have been like 13, I guess, roughly around that. And it had kind of led on from board games. So early kind of games workshop. Well, maybe not that early. There were probably plenty more before I got involved. But things like Talisman and stuff, Dungeon, and those kind of hero quests and all that kind of stuff kind of led me down the fantasy fiction path. And that kind of naturally led into D&D. So Advanced Dungeons and Dragons and the various settings around that. And then kind of as I got a bit older, kind of late teens, I kind of fell in with this motley crew of older guys who, not massively older mine, but probably about 5 years older than me, that did a variety of other types of games, things like Cyberpunk and GURPS and other stuff, including Star Wars. And from memory, I think I played like one adventure of Star Wars, but I do still have kind of obviously a big love for Star Wars and thus a fondness for anything kind of around that, whether it be a board game, role-playing game, etc.
Yeah, our last episode was actually on D&D. Do you have any favourite settings?
Well, I was massively into the fiction, so I loved Dragonlance. That was like my A1 go-to setting, and then after that, Forgotten Realms. Loved those two, mainly because I just devoured novels back then. I don't read much anymore beyond what I read on the internet. So I do kind of miss that a bit. But yeah, back then it was novel after novel, just consumed them. And so they were the settings that I went to with D&D.
Yeah, I think that's something that's happening because of the good old coronavirus. I really need to stay away from eBay. One of the things we talked about in the last show was any recommendations people had. And one of the recommendations I had was for a game called Old School Essentials by Necrotic Gnome. And I've got really into that in the last month or so, and as a result I've got sitting on the table in front of me two very early D&D modules. I've got B1 and B2 because they happen to pop up on my eBay feed, which proves that all of technology is conspiring against us and it's all hooked up. Believe it or not, the advert for the B2 module popped up on my MyFitnessPal app, which up until that point had been showing me adverts for fitness training and Under Armour. But clearly some part of the neural net that is the internet has got together and conspired to make me buy old Dungeons and Dragons supplements.
So go on then. What was the year of release?
The first one is 1979.
Oh God.
And the second one is 1981. So yeah, they're pretty old. I mean, Jason, you were in your early 30s when they came out. Do you own those ones?
No, I don't, mate. That's I didn't really come into the Star Wars game till quite a lot later after that, mate. Oh, scrub that. What was
Okay.
the question?
I forget it.
You didn't ask me about Star Wars, did you?
I was just making a point about you being old and
Oh,
the fact
mate.
that clearly your senility is kicked in and your mind's wandering.
That's the first time I've done that as well, isn't it?
They never scrub anything. Never scrub anything. These are the best bits, Jay.
Yeah, exactly. This is going to be kept in there, Jason, just to show you for the lack of commitment you have to this podcast.
I hate you. I was frantically trying to get unmuted me, and I was looking at character. I was actually looking at character templates, so I could actually inform my. Anyway, forget it.
Is that what you call that
Don't ask me
website?
questions
Character
like
templates.
Yeah, that's what they call it these days.
We are pro podcasters.
We are. This is quality radio. That's it. So there's a question for you all, not particularly Star Wars related, but with good old COVID keeping us all confined, is anyone doing any role playing at the moment?
Loads.
Not as much as I'd like, but yes, I am. And Iain here is the reason why, which is great. So thank you, Iain, for running our Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay Weekly.
You are very welcome. You've only made a few bad choices in it, so it's going pretty well.
Only a few? Wow.
I've got 3 D&D games going on at the moment. 2 D&D games and 1 Starfinder game. And when the Starfinder's over, I'll be running Dark Heresy for the same group. So we take turns reffing different games. So one of my friends is running Starfinder. As soon as he comes to the end of the adventure, we'll switch over. Next person will run the game. I'm up next. So
excellent.
Yeah, so that's quite good. But it's all using Roll20, Discord. One group's using Roll20 and Skype. The other group's using Fantasy Grounds and Mumble.
Yeah, Roll20 is pretty good. We've been using that for our Warhammer game. I've been trying to mess around with it and get all the funky stuff like dynamic lighting working, but it just feels like it makes it into too much of a tactical war game. I think it'd be fine for a kind of old school dungeon bash, but for going from town to town and actually role-playing and talking to people, it's not massively helpful.
No, but all you need really is some way to communicate and somewhere to roll dice that, exactly. I've rolled another 20. It's not that I don't trust anybody, but ultimately being able to get a computer to roll it and then everybody sees the result makes things pretty fair.
Yeah, my son and I, we recorded a little bonus episode of the podcast. It was a read-through of a fighting fantasy book. And it didn't end well. He died very early on, and afterwards he was like that. Dad, nobody could see the dice. Why couldn't we have just said that I rolled 12s all the time? Because that would have been very genuine. But you're 10, so I'll let you off.
Wouldn't it be nice to go back to being a kid again and just cheat at everything? The desire to win every single roll. And how that impacts your role playing, and when you get older, you're like, no, I don't care. Sometimes losing's more fun, Yeah.
But it's funny because I've actually been playing through some of the old fighting fantasy books with him, and I think his desire to win then was because he knew it was being recorded and going out to the wider world. But playing it normally, we played through one book where we didn't bother rolling dice, and we played other ones where we did roll dice, and he was like, "Oh, but you roll dice, it's much more fun." Because it's a challenge, which is a complete opposite to me when I was that age. I had the old 5-fingered bookmark, and I was like, "Hey, Iain, complete the book."
Yeah, I actually just played through one. Or by played through it one, I mean I played for 20 minutes and then died horribly but not because of any dice rolls, just because of a bad choice. Played a digital one that was free on Apple because of all our nostalgia talk, and it was a pirate one, and yeah, I clicked one option, then I clicked the other. Oh, you're dead. I'm like, okay, I guess that's Final Fantasy for you.
Fighting Fantasy is amazing. I had to pack all of mine away in a box the other day because I'm foolishly moving house during a pandemic. So all my books have now been packed away in the box.
Are you allowed to move house?
Yeah, we're allowed to move house as long as we're not...
I suppose there's plenty of space over there, right? You can do the social distancing quite easy. Right?
The state that I'm in is actually doing really well. We've only had 8 deaths because we were surprisingly proactive, unlike other states. So here's a question for you, because Jason, you were allegedly looking at character templates a minute ago,
Yeah.
not just messing around your phone, not paying attention. That's one of the parts of Star Wars I always thought was brilliant, was the fact in the West End Games version, you had all these character templates that were basically Star Wars stereotypes.
Yeah, exactly.
There was a smuggler, there was a Wookiee, there was
Yeah.
a young senator, etc. What was your favourite character that you played, and what was a template?
You're talking West End Games version, right? We're talking back D6 version, because there were other versions. I know you don't acknowledge them, Iain.
No. I do actually. I owned some of the other versions, but we shall come on to them shortly. But no, this is the West End Games.
So I think the two that I remember, and it was the arrogant noble, because you just love putting people's noses out of joint and being annoying. And I love the failed Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was one of the only
alcoholic Jedi.
Yeah, exactly. But it was one of the only two ways you could get a Force-sensitive character, because it was an alien student of the Force as well, or something.
There was actually
might be a supplement.
There was an alien one. There was a failed Jedi. There was a minor Jedi. But
I don't remember the minor Jedi. What was that?
Yeah, the minor Jedi. It was I don't know if it was in second ed, or maybe it was revised, but it was like a pretty crap Jedi. It was somebody who was basically go through their early Jedi training when the whole thing fell apart. But the best one was the chaotic Jedi. It was a guy who thought he was a Jedi.
He was. Yeah, he was awesome.
Yeah, and he basically, there's a quote on it that says something like, "I feel a disturbance in the Force." Seriously, guys, I do. This time, I promise, I do feel it.
Yeah, now that you mentioned him, I remember that one. That was quality.
I was looking through the book last night, the first ed one, in preparation for this, and go through the skills chapter. There's an entry for the survival skill, and it's explaining how you use the survival skill. And the example it gives is the failed Jedi saying, "So there's no bar for kilometers around us." The GM says, "I'm afraid so." The failed Jedi says, "Okay, I use my survival skill to look for booze." Games Master says, "Your survival skill?" The Jedi says, "Yep, says here, you can use it to find the necessities of life." Games Master, "I don't think, failed Jedi, I'm telling you, liquor's a necessity of life for me. Kind of roll the dice, please."
Nice.
Punchies or try to keep things all PC back in the days. That's funny.
Yeah. What about you, Steve? Did you have any favourites?
Oh gosh, you've already kind of went into some of those ones where they would stretch the concept of there's still Jedi, even though there's not, for all the canon back then, was like, you know, such a big deal of Luke being the last Jedi with Yoda, and how it's interesting to see like how that evolved into all of the books and later on canon of how they survived, but they didn't have good reasons for it back then, so these are the ones they came up with. So yeah, that's those always gave a kick, because those were always like the struggle to make a Jedi, because Jedi are what all the kids want to play with the laser swords, but really there's not any Jedi left, so you're all stuck playing smuggler or senators or stuff. So it was that was interesting, even though I never really wanted to play the Jedi, because that, again, there weren't any. So if you're, you know, bit of a stretch, but yeah.
I always found the more kind of fringe concepts more interesting, because when I played at university, there was one guy who always wanted to be the Jedi, and the GM indulged him, and there was one series of adventures. It was basically us traipsing around the galaxy looking for stuff so he could build a lightsaber, which was fine, but it was a bit the GM making up as he went along, because we didn't really know much canon back then, and this player basically being a glorified D&D cleric, because it was like, well, what can you do with your Jedi powers? Oh, I can lift things, I can heal things. Great, he's just been shot, go and heal him. You know, it wasn't really Luke Skywalker, but the concepts I liked playing, because you had these people who were, you know, I want to be the Jedi, or there was always the guy who wanted to be the badass bounty hunter that, you know, could wrestle rancors, you know, barehanded, and, you know, smoke Boba Fett for breakfast. But my favourite character I ever played was a protocol droid. You've got all these people are tooled up with weapons, or they can fly ships, or, you know, the Jedi. and it's fun playing an essentially useless droid that is there largely for the comic relief and occasionally to translate something.
You'd have been so annoying.
I was ridiculously annoying because you've got people that are like, okay, we're at the sealed Imperial vault. What are we going to do? I'm going to get my thermal detonators out, right? I'll look for stormtroopers. What are you going to do? I'm going to mill about aimlessly and speak with an overly loud, very posh voice and see if there's anyone around to help us, and just basically put the party into worse situations. But the best time was when someone played along with it and someone chose to be an Ewok, and I was the only one that could translate. So the Ewok player would basically say something like yib yib and then write down a bit of paper and hand it to me what they were actually saying. And I used to take great joy in either translating this or refusing to translate it if someone had been unpleasant to us.
I was looking at these character templates, and you mentioned the Ewok there. And to be honest, you as a protocol droid is just so you. To be honest, I just like you could just see you in that role right now, annoying the shit out of everybody in the party. But this character template for the Ewok is it's quite hilarious in the fact that it has its list of skills, and one of them is demolition. Like I can just imagine, like the Ewoks, they all get together and in the evening and they practice blowing shit up, and it's like, what, really? Demolition? Just because the whole Endor thing happened? They're all like,
Yeah,
that's the basis for the template.
As we all know from Return of the Jedi, clearly the Ewoks were masters at siegecraft because for some reason on that forest moon they had catapults.
They were unstoppable.
That always bugged me a little bit about Return of the Jedi. Like, why have they got catapults? Who are they sieging? Who are the Ewoks having to knock down walls for?
Obviously, you didn't see the cartoon, the Caravan of Love, or whatever it was called.
Well,
Caravan of Love.
Pardon?
That was a whole different thing, Joe.
Sorry.
Is this these character template websites you're looking at again? You used to own that Ewoks film on DVD, didn't you, Jason?
I did, and that was, why was that, Iain?
Did someone maybe buy it from a bargain bin for your birthday?
Yes, they may have done, including several other quite weird and strange B movies, some of which were actually quite good fun.
Yeah, the best one Wes and I ever found, we found it at the Co-op for 99 pence in the bargain bin. It was called Frankenstein Reborn versus the Werewolf.
Which was, that's pretty tame. If you look at what you can find nowadays in those bargain bins, that is pretty tame. I mean, there's no shark tornadoes. It's just Frankenstein coming back versus a werewolf. It's pretty standard stuff.
It was.
Just to get back on track, it's Caravan of Courage. Yeah, I never watched it. It went straight in the recycle. So thanks for that.
That's what I actually found when I was doing the research for this. When you look at the state of the Star Wars franchise nowadays, when it's this $70 billion industry versus where it was in 1987, the West End Games basically got the license for this game for next to nothing. At that point, everyone was just losing interest. The only Star Wars media that had been produced in the years before 1987 were those two Ewok films and the really bad Droids cartoon.
Whoa, I won't have a bad word said about that Droids cartoon.
Right.
I enjoyed that Droids cartoon.
Go on, convince me then. Why was the Droids cartoon good?
Theme tune, that's it. Mic drop.
Now you've got me wanting to go listen to the Droids.
Yeah.
I don't remember the theme song for that. I'm going to have to go listen to it.
Can you sing the theme
Thanks,
tune?
Wes.
No. I'm not singing
Thank
on
God
your
for that.
podcast.
Be so good if you did.
It's not happening.
So go back on the subject then of
Yes.
the role-playing game and not having Wes sing anything. In a very short space of time, what did you like about it and what did you not like about it? Because I know, Jason, you mentioned the other ones, which we'll come to in a minute. But what did you like about the D6 system and what did you not like?
It just seemed to feel right. I mean, it was a bit different. The D6 system itself was kind of a bit different to other kind of things I'd done at the time. So D20, well, not even D20, just D&D effectively. And I don't know, it just felt like Star Wars, which was good. And you could get into it really quickly. As you said, there's loads of these templates. You just pick up the one you want to use, and you can get going pretty quickly. You're talking a long time ago, and my memory's not what it used to be.
In a galaxy far, far away, no doubt?
Exactly, indeed, yeah. I do remember some of it There was certain things didn't work very well, and the combat was a bit clunky and things like that, but nothing particularly terrible.
From my vague recollections, which was a long time ago, certainly it was a very different beast than, your equivalent red box. Even just looking back at those character sheets today, or yesterday, or the day before, whenever I was doing research for this, it was very interesting to read those stat lines and go, oh, that's what they mean by that again. I remember that. Yeah, it felt distinct and interesting enough that it kind of got you out of the, let's play Dungeons and Dragons mindset, especially because it was Star Wars. So
what else was there? I mean, if you're talking sci-fi, what else was there at the time? You're looking at Traveller, maybe. Traveller was great. Don't knock Traveller. We'll have words about that at some point.
No, Traveller was all right. I just don't really like systems where you can die during character creation.
Paranoia, they were obviously vaguely science fiction-y.
And Iain loves Paranoia, right?
I know he does.
Where you can die multiple times in the briefing room, as opposed to character generation, which apparently is not on.
Listen, if you're all good, loyal citizens, there's nothing to worry about. The fact that you lot continually get up to shenanigans is of your own doing.
Thank you, friend computer.
You're welcome, loyal citizen.
I think for me, it's always been a case with whatever role-playing game I've played that the systems are the least important thing to me. And I know we've kind of shared this view a bit when we LARPed and stuff. As long as you've got a DM that's prepared to be flexible enough to help you tell a good story, then whatever the underlying system, I just want it to allow me to make a character easily, to be able to make choices simply. I want it to be as frictionless as possible. And from what I remember of Star Wars, there was a certain level of complexity because of, you've got spaceships and everything else that you've got to cater for in it. You don't necessarily have to deal with in something like D&D, but it just seemed to work quite well. It was functional. It did the job. It didn't get in the way of the storytelling. And that's the main thing. You want to tell a good story, have lots of fun doing it, and not have to worry about the mechanics of the dice rolling and the stats and everything getting in the way and causing, arguments over, but I want to do this, and you won't let me, and because the rules and stuff. And this system, it did work. And I think arguments over whether it's been improved over the years with other releases, but it did the job at the time, and it didn't really get in the way, and it handled that complexity with the different things you've got to take into account: planets and space and spaceships and blaster fights and lightsaber fights and everything else going on, and the Force, of course, on top of that.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. It's the one background where you could tell those great stories because everyone knows it. It doesn't require a massive deal of prep and setup, and you're more or less in there and you're ready to go straight away. The thing I like about the system is the GM assigns a difficulty number when you want to do something, and you say, it's 15, throw a bunch of D6, and if you get 15 and over, you do it. And that's really, really simple. And when you reread the rule book, there's a lot of, here's some rough guidance as to, what easy, very easy, difficult, etc. looks like. But it's a really simple system for exactly what you've mentioned, just telling stories. And when you look at any of the published adventures, that's the one thing that really stands out is they treat them like movies. You get a script at the beginning that you read out. There's even an opening crawl in most of them that the GM reads out, and after that, bang, you're straight into the action. There's not a single Star Wars adventure I've played where the beginning is some slow burn where you're in a briefing room and some old general's telling you what you have to do, and then you're flying a long journey somewhere. It's always action after action after action, very much like the scenes in the film. And I absolutely love that because it's very fast moving, and it, as you say, it lets you tell the story rather than concentrating too much on the minutiae. We've joked in this podcast before about the likes of MERP and Rollmaster, where the level of complexity is just ridiculous. And I struggle with systems like that because ultimately, like you've mentioned, Wes, I want to be there to tell a story and to let the players have an adventure. The other thing that I did love about it, though, and Steve, this might give you PTSD going back to the Wraith games that we used to play, is the concept of the dark side points. It very much encourages you as the GM to put players in situations where they can get some extra dice to do something but there's a chance that they'll be tainted by the dark side in doing so. And it never fails to amaze me how often players will take that option, which as a GM is always hilarious.
Oh, you must have loved that so much.
I made that joke about us playing Wraith. In Wraith, you can say, you could do this action, I'll make it easier for you, I'll give you all these shadow dice you can use. And there's a small chance that something bad will happen. 9 times out of 10, the players will take it. It's exactly the same with dark side points. You're in a jam, there's a bunch of stormtroopers bearing down on you. You could try and duke it out, or you can call on the power of the dark side, and it can make it easier for you. So many players will always take that option, which I absolutely love.
I definitely have memories of that. In fact, I think you're causing a few flashbacks there because, as an 18-year-old playing this game and, having a mad love of Star Wars, when you're 18, you don't really think about consequences. So when somebody puts, the easy way out in front of you, regardless of what films you've seen, and where that path leads, it's like, oh yeah, no, we'll just do it this time, just this one time. We'll just have a little taste of the dark side. It's okay, it's fine. It's not. I'm not going down the path. I'm just dipping my toe in just to get us out of this little fix. It'll all be good. I'll do the right thing next time.
Have any of you played the module Domain of Evil?
No, I mean, I was just thinking about it, and I think the only module I can remember ever playing was the scavenger hunt. Not scavenger hunt. Tatooine Manhunt.
Yeah,
that's
that was
the fella. The bounty hunters, and you got to go and get this the Republic Navy guy and all that kind of stuff. That was the only one I remember of the published ones. Other than that, I think we always did kind of homebrew stuff.
The reason I mentioned Domain of Evil, it's rebels crashing a swamp planet, a bit like Dagobah. There's a dark side nexus on it where there's this fallen Jedi, and they ultimately get into a confrontation with them and go into the titular Domain of Evil, which is a bit like the creepy cave that Luke goes into in Dagobah. The interesting thing is you put all this foreshadowing here that this is the dark side and it's going to tempt you and do all these terrible things, and then you go through a series of trials where the dark side tries to tempt them. And it's amazing, even though they've seen the film, they know the whole Yoda line of you only take into that cave what you bring with you, and players, the amount of time that they struggle with it and want to take the easy way out and just fight their way through it. And it's I think a testament to how well the adventure's written, but it's also a really fun, it's a bit more like horror in Star Wars than any of the other published adventures, but it's a really good one just for that particular dark side slant that it puts on it. Do any of you have any favourite gaming moments from when you played Star Wars?
I mean, the only thing I remember was just huge amounts of fights with stormtroopers. Wes was talking earlier about the fact that he wants to be into this frictionless storytelling, high brow role-playing experience. That wasn't kind of my experience of Star Wars. It was an awful lot more just running around with a blaster in hand. God knows how. We never recorded ammo. I don't think you had to, so it was excessively combat orientated, which is why I'm struggling to come up with something kind of it was fun at the time. It was exactly what I was enjoying at the time. Not all of us came into role-playing as a fully formed Jedi role player such as Wes.
Hey, I'm not saying highbrow. My favorite film in the Star Wars series is A New Hope. The moment when Han Solo takes out the TIE fighter of Darth Vader out of the equation and
Spoiler alert.
But that's me. That's what I love, and I know everybody's a big fan of Empire, but I'm all for the action and the ridiculous heroics and those kind of moments. So it's not highbrow by any means. It's just I just want a good story. I just want fun.
That's space opera pretty much defined, right? And that's Star Wars space opera. I mean, it was funny. I read the preface and it was talking about it defined what space opera was. It's kind of a weird term to think about from a genre perspective, but it's clearly very, very Star Wars. It'd be nice to see more of those highbrow moments because it'd be nice to stretch that genre. But honestly, like, there's nothing more Star Wars than shooting stormtroopers and blowing up TIE fighters. I mean, that's kind of the point of the genre. So it's I'm sure Iain could prove me wrong. Like he said earlier, I'm sure he could come up with something suitably interesting and compelling in a Star Wars adventure. But, yeah.
No, actually, I agree with you guys on this one. I think when you play the Star Wars role-playing game, you ultimately want to play Star Wars. I use the example of the Domain of Evil adventure, which is a bit different, but it's still Star Wars. You read through the adventure, and it's a series of action sequences cut up with, in this case, moments of horror. But if you look at any of the other published materials, it's series of action sequences cut up with role-playing opportunities to basically allow characters to wisecrack with each other. It's not role-playing in the same way of, playing Vampire the Masquerade, where you're going to sit brooding in the corner and bemoaning your lost humanity and what a monster you have become, but it's still role-playing. Fast-moving, fast-paced action where you're duking out with stormtroopers and blowing up TIE fighters. That's kind of what you come to it for. I'm sure you can make a game where there's some sort of senatorial intrigue and you're trying to find out who the traitor is or something. But would that necessarily be as much fun as having a land speeder chase through Beggar's Canyon while stormtroopers are shooting at you? I don't know.
True. But segueing from that, one of the interesting things I liked about the game, which you referenced in your history of it, podcast section, is the amount of extra lore and depth that they gave to the world and universe that was never there before and is irrevocably changed things now. Reading through all that, they added so much depth that you would never think, it might give a GM some interesting name dropping things, but if you're gonna go fight stormtroopers, you don't care about the inner workings of Comp Nor, which is I'd never even really heard of Comp Nor in recent times till I went and reread some of the Imperial source. What the heck is Comp Nor? They never mentioned that in the movies, but there's the really detailed organizational charts and breakdowns of all these different departments.
It's insane the amount of world building they did. I mean, most of the names of alien races that they use in Star Wars nowadays come from West End games. They've had things like the Death Star Technical Companion, which, when you actually read it as a role-playing supplement, isn't actually of that much use to you, because you read through it and you think, well, when would I ever use this? When would there be an opportunity, timeline-wise, for me to get a bunch of rebels onto the Death Star for an adventure? There's a very short period of time between the Rebel Alliance knowing where the Death Star is and it getting blown up. However, you read the book, and the book is absolutely fascinating. It's got all this information in there that, clearly someone in West End Games has just gone, right, how would the Death Star work? And they've put all that information together, which is amazing.
And that's one of the great things about this as a role-playing game, I think, particularly when it came out. As a consumer of Star Wars, having that access to that wealth of information that you didn't have before in all these different books just gives you so much stuff to devour. It's the reason why I loved the D&D settings I loved, was because I got into them through the stories of the books that I was reading, and then bang, I've got all these different supplements and stuff that I can read that expand on that and give me so much more depth and breadth to the world that I'm invested in. And the Star Wars stuff's like that. The Death Star Companion, who doesn't want to own the book that has the details about the Death Star in it, all of those things just make this so appealing as a role-playing game for people that were into Star Wars.
Yeah, I mean, totally agreed. I mean, even after they started to resurge into the expanded universe books, the Timothy Zahn trilogies and so on, them releasing source books on novels that already had a lot of detail, that you were already starting to get super invested in the book and find out all the stats of the characters in the books as well. That was some of my favorite moments of following that game as it evolved, was just seeing how they jumped first class onto the post movie stuff as well. It was.
I have a similar memory. So again, one of the things that I said in the earlier podcast was when Timothy Zahn went to write the post-Return of the Jedi trilogy, he received a big box of West End game books, and they were like, here, read those. This is the world that you're setting it in. This was the official material at the time. I did a master's in English language and literature, and I spent 4 years reading very, very highbrow, very, very thick books that I had to interpret every week and look for hidden meanings and what was the social situation when this was written and what political references, blah, 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 blah. When I graduated, my wife and I were going on holiday, and I went to buy some books to read while on holiday. And I bought the 3 Timothy Zahn Dark Empire novels, and it was such a welcome release. I'd spent 4 years not being able to particularly enjoy books because I'm looking for these hidden meanings and symbolism and blah blah blah. You don't get that when you're reading a Star Wars novel. You don't really need to know what Chewie's motivation is. Chewie is there to help Han fly the Millennium Falcon. Luke's there to do heroic good stuff. And you've suddenly got these books set, as Steve said, in this expanded universe that West End Games are responsible for. But the first thought to me after reading these books were, I want to go and get the role-playing supplements and see how I can introduce this into my games, because this is such a cool, immersive world that can be built on.
Yeah, those Timothy Zahn books, they were so good at the
They
time.
I know, if only they'd been made into movies.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say. Is like, they were fantastic follow-ups to Return of the Jedi, and would have made some excellent films.
So this is not an attempt to be controversial. I will state that right now. One of the things that I loved about the pre-published adventures with West End Games is they all felt very Star Wars. Like you mentioned Tatooine Manhunt, Jason. I reread that for this podcast, and rereading it, I was like, this is brilliant. It is just Star Wars. All the locations are familiar. The dialogue that they give on the script for the Rebels feels very Star Wars. The cuts to the bad guys all feel very Star Wars. The 3 films that were released recently, Force Awakens I thought was good. It seemed to fit in. The other 2 to me just did not feel Star Wars the same way that these very old West End game supplements did. And it's not an attempt to be controversial. I enjoyed them, but they didn't feel Star Wars.
I think it's fair to say Force Awakens feels the most Star Wars of the most recent Star Wars films, just because it cribs so heavily from what's come before. It does. I think Abrams did a very good job of capturing the essence by revisiting what had come before. And there's definitely conversations to be had about the 2 that followed. But you're right, Force Awakens definitely feels more in line with what had come before, I think.
You've mentioned, Jason, the other systems, the non-West End Games ones. I know you were and still are a big D20 fan. Did you own any of those?
So I didn't own them, but I had a regular kind of group, and one of the guys there did. So we played 2 pretty long campaigns of the D20 version of Star Wars. I think the first one I had a Force Adept, was supposed to be like an untrained Force sensitive character who turned out to be a clone. At one point we discovered a base with just clones of my character all the way along, just waiting to be activated, which was a bit freaky. I think it came from this was way back when nobody actually understood what the Clone Wars were, because nobody'd seen the cartoons. And I'd made this glib comment that actually the Clone Wars was the Empire trying to clone Jedi to make an army of Force users. And I think the ref kind of went, I'm having that. And that's what ended up happening. And the second one, I played a Claudite. I don't know if you know what one of those is. They had a very brief appearance in the second film. Sorry, episode 2.
Oh, were they those shape-changing things?
Indeed, yeah, the shapeshifters. And I had a great amount of fun with that. So, trying to get past people by using kind of conning people and so forth about pretending to be people and getting into all kinds of situations where you've impersonated an Imperial officer, you got so far, and then things start to break down around you. So yeah, it was good fun. But to go back to the comment that you made earlier, it didn't feel quite as Star Wars to me as the West End Games. I think just the concepts of levels, it's a bit disjointed. It breaks it a little bit, and also I don't think they handle things like the dark side quite as well. There was quite a cool dark side power that you could like make somebody feel excessive fear, and they either took a minus because of that fear, or they gained a dark side point. So again, you could ignore the fear, but you gain the dark side point.
Nice.
And it was a bit, as you say, it's like Hobson's choice, isn't it? It's you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. But it explains why Luke would be hiding in the shadows underneath the stairs rather than facing and throwing himself into combat.
Yeah, I actually owned the Dark Side Source book for the
Of course you did.
D21. Again, similar to you, I didn't feel the D20 system, because I bought the original D20 one and also the Saga edition that came out. And the Saga edition, I just didn't really bother with. It didn't do much for me. It felt very much like D&D 4th edition, but with lightsabers. And I bought the D20 one mainly because, again, it was before episodes 2 and 3 came out, and I was kind of desperate, like Steve mentioned, for more lore. I was like, there must be some hints in here as to what's going to happen in the coming movies. And when I bought the Dark Side Source book, a bit like I think your ref, I had all these grand visions as to what episodes 2 and 3 were going to be like because of what was written down in there. And I was somewhat disappointed when none of that was realised. But again, like you, Jason, the concept of levels didn't really work for me, because I always think with levels, you see it with normal D&D, there are some things that are always out with your reach. If you're a level 1 fighter in Dungeons and Dragons, you're not going to be killing a dragon. Likewise in Star Wars, that means is there different levels of Stormtrooper, or the Stormtroopers just cease being a pest after you get to level 3 because they're all level 1? And why are they level 1 when they're meant to be the Empire's elite? So yeah, it didn't really work for me, but I wasn't a massive fan of the system. I think it kind of slowed things down, which wasn't very Star Wars.
It's funny how just the difference in mechanics of a system can impact the feel of a game. I haven't played the D20 one. In fact, I'm not even sure if I've played the D20 system full stop, because I kind of had this massive period in my life where I didn't do any role playing, or at least tabletop role playing. And I think that kind of aligned with when D20 was popular. But I do find it really interesting to hear you both say that, just because the mechanics and the fact that this one had levels and stuff can really impact how it feels.
The thing is, if you think about Luke taking the shot on the exhaust port in the Death Star in Episode 4, right? That in D20 is going to be a really hard shot, okay? Yeah. And you've probably got to be level 15 or 20 to attempt it,
right?
Okay?
Yeah.
Whereas Luke clearly wasn't that level. Whereas in the D6 edition, I think if you spent a force point, you literally doubled your dice.
Yeah, that was right.
It was mad. It was like a massive power hike, which meant you could go from 0 to hero just by spending that force point. And it just, as I say, it meant you had less. Whereas in D20, you're at that level. You're operating at that level all the time. You don't have that kind of peak, that kind of one-off chance. That's a shot in a million, kid.
Yeah.
At the moment, it just doesn't happen.
And that's the thing, in the D6 system, it actually uses the old thermal exhaust port as an example for the force points, because like you said, you spend your force point, you double the amount of dice you get, so you can do incredible things, or you can do lots of little things. The example it gives you for actually gaining more force points is if you use your force point heroically, you get it back at the end of the adventure. However, if you use it heroically at the dramatically appropriate moment, i.e. the climax of the movie, like, I don't know, if you're taking the shot at a thermal exhaust port, you'll get it back plus another one. And it uses that as almost like the mechanism to explain how the characters in the film, start getting power, and how you should be acting as a hero to gain all this extra power by, behaving heroically at the dramatically appropriate moment, which was always a turn of phrase I rather liked. I thought it summed up the essence of them quite nicely.
And it totally encourages the types of stories that Star Wars was telling at that time. Yeah.
And you see that even in I think Steve mentioned it earlier, the chapter where it talks about things like, what is space opera? And it's got a wonderful chapter in the initial Star Wars book about how to write an adventure. And one of the pieces of advice it gives, which is, and again, you have to consider when this was written. This was like 1987, when most RPGs were fantasy. A lot of them were very dungeon crawly, and it was about gaining power and getting treasure. There's basically a section that says your players have plot armor. That they're not going to die at the beginning when a stormtrooper shoots them. If a stormtrooper shoots them near the beginning, maybe they're stunned, maybe they're captured. You do stuff that's appropriate for the story, they will meet their reckoning at the end of the story, because they are the heroes. There's no fun if the hero dies in Act 1. The hero dies at the end of the third act, or he succeeds against all odds, which I thought it's a wonderful piece of advice to put in any RPG nowadays, but certainly for back in 1987, when a lot of adventure sections in books where here's how you design a dungeon on graph paper.
It's quite
Yeah.
progressive, right?
Right, exactly. It doesn't quite have the purple prose of the later White Wolf stuff, but you know,
Yeah, nobody's sitting there writing poetry and lamenting their forgotten their former humanity or whatever. Yeah,
that was every one of your vampire characters, Jason, wasn't it?
not just my vampire characters, my wraith characters, my demon characters, my hunter characters, and basically anything you refed, Ian.
Actually, your demon character was a proper edgelord.
A what?
An angsty edgelord.
All right, okay, cool.
Well, what did you think of it?
I have no idea. I think the hearing's going. It's age. It's catching up on me.
Yeah, I know you were born a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
Far away.
Or Newcastle, as it's better known.
At least it's
Doesn't
not
look like
Sunderland.
Middlesbrough to me.
So, I think, Steve, previously, either the previous podcast or previous talking to you, you mentioned the Fantasy Flight Star Wars system. Has anyone seen that?
Yep. I play everything, mate.
Is that a good yip or a bad yip?
So it's hard to kind of decide. I mean, personally, I'm not a fan. So you get all these weird dice, and you get base dice based on your statistic, and then it changes shape when you get trained in something, and you roll a pool of dice made up. It just seems overly complicated to me. The other thing is, it just seems too hard to succeed compared to, it's, I guess, I don't know, I suppose you're supposed to miss a lot of blaster shots, right?
Are you?
Well, if you're a stormtrooper, you are, right?
Well, yeah. It's like that old Family Guy episode where the stormtroopers, that they rush out after the Millennium Falcon and they fire and they miss. And one of them turns around to the other one and says something like, Bob, have we ever hit anything with these guns?
They revisited it, if you've seen The Mandalorian, haven't they? The two guys in the Mandalorian try shooting a can, two stormtroopers, and they can't hit it either. So there's, even to the point that the series are riffing on this fact that they couldn't hit a barn door at 5 paces. Yet they're supposed to be the. In fact, I remember was it Ben Kenobi's quote? Only Imperial stormtroopers are this precise.
See, that was that creeping senility that Obi-Wan had at that moment.
Yeah. Right now, I'm empathizing with him quite a lot.
Yeah, I know it's the weirdest thing, because even when you look at the West End Games one, stormtroopers are terrible. They've got this armor that actually hampers them, and they can't aim for toffee, which is fine. It fits with the ethos of Star Wars, that the stormtroopers will blaze away and the heroes will definitely avoid everything and emerge victorious. But it always just rankles slightly that these are meant to be the Empire's elite, and you're like, God, what are their conscripts like if these are the elite? Anyway, sorry, Fantasy Flight, go.
I mean, Fantasy Flight is kind of taking over the world when it comes to role-playing these days. And I mean, I'm a fan of it if for no other reason than it's a well-produced, great production value Star Wars RPG that they're trying some new things with. I'm not going to debate saying I've played it a lot, because I haven't. I own the basic set and have a flick through it and would really like to try it to be able to compare these kinds of things. But just from a time perspective, I haven't. But more Star Wars content and more lore and more world building is never a bad thing, especially now with all of the new goodies. We're at the point now where there's a wealth of new stuff that they're trying to, that we've lost out on 20 years of expanded universe. So give me more stuff that I can build for the new universes.
Can't argue with that.
Yeah, it's like I know where Timothy Zahn, but I have a bunch of the names and things like that. So give me the official stuff now that's actually blessed again.
Funny shaped dice. That's the one thing that always rankles for me. That they've got their own.
Yeah.
They're trying something new.
But they do that with every game, don't they?
So
it's not really something new. Then it's something trite.
But okay. Dice aside, as I said, I've already said I'm not a fan. I agree with you, Ian. I just think it's a money printing exercise, if I'm honest, and it just overcomplicates things. It is trying something new. Maybe it's a failed experiment, in my opinion, but maybe it's, your mileage may vary, I guess. But conversely, it does feel more Star Wars than D20.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, I've got so my character. I'm trying to remember the name of the alien race. The ones that look like insects. It's really bugging me now. I'll have to find. Hey, no pun intended. But he's a bounty hunter, and kind of built him around the kind of big game hunter thing, and he feels like he fits into Star Wars an awful lot better than the 2020 stuff. So it's definitely got plus points, you know, and as you say, as you know, Steve said, it's got the lore to back it up. It's got the, you know, more in-depth stuff, and Fantasy Flight are always impeccable when they produce their stuff. I guess that's probably why it costs so much, but you know, it's usually very pretty to look at, right?
So I should say, not bashing Fantasy Flight as a whole. I love the
not at all.
I think the production values are amazing.
Yeah.
As you know, Jason, I buy board games by the pound. And
so you're well served by those guys.
Yeah, then. Fantasy Flight served me very well in that regard. I just can't help but feel that the role-playing games almost like an afterthought, because they have X-Wing, they have Armada, they have whatever that miniatures-based one is, and it's almost like, what else can we do with the license? Let's do an RPG. Yeah, that's probably my gripe with it.
I think it's not a bad, you know, if you're not dice roll heavy and you can kind of flow through the game and do the storytelling and just play Star Wars, but there comes a point where you're going to have to shoot something, or you're going to have to, open the door or hack the computer, slice the computer. Sorry, let's get the terminology right. And you know, you're going to need to roll those dice, and then working out, well, I've got, you know, stat of 3, my skill of 2, so I've got 2 yellow dice and 1 green dice, and then what does this symbol mean, and what does that symbol detract from? And it slows things down to me. Whereas if it just made it simple, like you get D6 if your stat's untrained, you get D8 if it's trained, and you just add it all up, and maybe that would have been simpler. Mm-hmm. But I get the fact that we're trying something new. And it does have the concept of the light side and dark side destiny points. So you roll for those at the start of the session, and you can invoke them and at any time to get the story to flow in a particular way. So if you want to find a particular piece of equipment that you need, then you can use a light side point, but that becomes a dark side point. So the more light side points you use, the more dark side points you're giving the ref, which is kind of nice. It's kind of a good little way of doing it.
And did they ever publish any adventures for it?
A few, yeah. I try to remember. Honestly, I don't remember. I remember playing it quite a bit, and I'm pretty sure they were all pre-written adventures. So we started with Edge of Empire, and there was, you know, it was all based out on the edge of the Tatooine type planets, and very limited Imperial engagements. And then we went to the Age of Empire. And basically, as the ref bought the books, you kind of moved along. But there were definitely stories.
Yeah, it's one thing that, like, these days in kind of like your adventure modules, so it's an interesting, I suppose you could completely talk about the state of affairs with adventure modules, campaign books, with today where they were at when you were dealing with the swathes of 30-page modules for Star Wars and D&D, all these games, and kind of like how they've changed the dynamics that are now. Like, I'm trying to think, because obviously things like Pathfinder and Starfinder, they've got the sort of like the serialized smaller adventures that build a bigger one. You've got like things like Dungeons and Dragons that have these bigger, hardback, level 1 through 10 type adventures. And I'm actually curious to find out what Jason finds as far as what they're doing with the Fantasy Flight version for Star Wars.
So they've literally got 3 that I can see, official ones, and yeah, they all ring a bell. So Beyond the Rim, that's the Age of Empire one, the Jewel of Yavin, and then Mask of the Pirate Queen. And I definitely remember we were doing Mask of the Pirate Queen. We're very near the edge of that end when we ended the campaign, due to the ref moving away. So yeah, we were all doing the pre-published ones, but there wasn't many of them, but they were quite long.
Yeah, I'm always a sucker for pre-published stuff, just because, again, with some of the West End stuff, I loved it because it was very well written, and other things, as I mentioned, the Death Star Technical Companion, you could take parts of that and you can work it into your own stuff. So I was just really curious to see if they had any. I know that a lot of systems always will have their, almost like their flagship campaign, like Warhammer Fantasy has Enemy Within, Call of Cthulhu has Masks of Nyarlathotep. I just wondered whether it had anything similar to that, or if it's more in the terms of the smaller pre-published modules rather than bigger campaigns.
So yeah, I mean, those adventures for Age of Empire, I think we played all of them. They're quite long, but they are built around sort of like a film. So they come in acts. So you get generally 3 acts, and then at some point they did feel a little bit forced. You'd accept the mission, and you'd be like, okay, well now I need to go and do it. And all the next thing you know, you were exiting hyperspace at the planet where you need to go, and you're like, but I didn't do anything. So there was a little bit of that in it. But yeah, generally they were fairly well written, and they did going back to keep going back to comment. They felt Star Wars. So get rid of the system, and I was quite happy with it.
It's similar actually to the older adventures. One thing that I liked about them was they always started you in the middle of things, and it wasn't just you've accepted the mission and you're on your spaceship flying whatever. It was literally in the middle of something. So one of my favorite ones is an adventure called Black Ice. And at one point at the beginning, the rebels are infiltrating an Imperial science facility, and it's them standing around talking about their mission, but they're trying to decide what the next step is and how they're going to get out the base. So they've actually more or less done the mission right at the beginning of the adventure. So there's none of that awkward stuff that you sometimes have in an RPG where people are like, well, actually, would I do this? Or this seems too dangerous. We'll go and do something else.
Already done it.
Yeah, exactly. You've already done it and you're picking your way out of trouble. That adventure has a wonderful little Easter egg in it, because in fact, a lot of the published materials have these Easter eggs where the players are wandering around this facility and there's various scientists they can bump into. They go into this one room and there's this holographic representation of the Death Star. And there's these two scientists watching this hologram, and it's a replay of the Battle of Yavin. And eventually, like, the Death Star blows up, and they're scratching their heads, going, "Yeah, I don't know how that could have happened." And there's a minor technician there, and he kind of at one point says to the players, "Yeah, I'm not really very important here. I'm just here observing. I had a small part to play in the Death Star's construction. I designed the thermal exhaust ports." And it's just little Easter eggs like that I think make those adventures pretty cool, because little shout outs to the films there.
Also, I mean, you didn't see Han Solo and Luke worrying about how many weeks' rations they've got and whether they've packed pythons and rope and all the stuff you worry about in D&D. They just like jump in a fighter and go, right?
Well, in fact, you mentioned earlier about not keeping track of ammo. It literally says in the rule book, don't bother keeping track of ammo. If you want them to run out of ammo, let them do it at a dramatically appropriate moment.
Exactly, that was what was important. It wasn't about how many, it wasn't bookkeeping and accountancy about how many shots you've used. It was when was dramatically important, and that's a great thing. It's a good kind of steer on how to run the game.
And it's kind of it's the sort of Star Wars thing that when you look at the films and you've got Han and Chewie patching up the Millennium Falcon in an asteroid belt, and they're passing all those random things to each other and talking about Hydra spanners and everything else. That's the way you should be playing the role-playing game. You should never be keeping track of, well, does Chewie have enough cable for them to rig up the hyperdrive?
Did you pack the Hydra spanner?
Yeah, exactly. Did you pack the Hydra spanner, Chewie? It's more no, okay, you're under fire, there's asteroids bumping off the ship, let's see if you can do this. And likewise, if you land on a planet, you're never going to go, oh, does the Millennium Falcon have a rope somewhere? We might need a rope at a later point. You can assume that it's there without having to do much in the way of bookkeeping. And Star Wars never actually came, at least initially, which was kind of surprising, with masses of equipment lists. There was some equipment listed, usually stuff you'd seen in the films, but there was certainly that trend in the 90s, I think, of a lot of role-playing supplements, and things like Cyberpunk were infamous for it, of supplements that just included gear.
Books.
Yeah, just kit books, which, and Palladium games in particular, were awful for that. You could just buy books that listed firearm after firearm, and there's only so many ways you could say it does D6 damage. And Star Wars never really suffered from that. There was a lot of advice about making up your own gadgets. If the rebels want some piece of equipment that does something, have them make a technical roll. They could probably jury rig it out of spare parts, which again is wonderful. It's very, very Star Wars. So, gents, that's us coming up to the hour mark. So I'm afraid we'll have to call it a podcast at this point. Does anyone have anything that they'd like to plug, anything you want to give a shout out to? And we'll do it here on the podcast, and we'll do it on Twitter as well.
No, I don't have anything. That I'm working on at the moment to share. But do if you've enjoyed the podcast, you should do what Iain says, and you should sign up and subscribe to it, and leave ratings and stuff, because that is really, really useful. As somebody who did it for a long time, if you've enjoyed any of us rambling, then do leave positive ratings, because it'll help him. And as for me, I'm just on Twitter. My stupid username is WideAwakeWesley. So if you do want to, follow someone who just talks shit about films and games and stuff and has some vague interest in role-playing games, then you can follow me on there.
I think obviously it's safe to say that there's some politics on there as well, Wes.
Well, there used to be quite a lot. There's much, much less now, because it just drives me nuts. So I'm trying to, we're in a world-threatening pandemic at the minute, so I think politics can kind of wait.
Yeah, you think that. And then I look at my Twitter feed every day and it just makes me sad. But I'm not going to go down that particular alley at the moment. Anyway,
no, because if you do, it'll be like the Phantom Menace. Keep the politics out of the Star Wars, yeah?
Yeah. I'm surprised actually we get through the whole podcast without mentioning the Phantom Menace.
I was hoping we would.
Yeah. It's just like, how do you turn people off a franchise more than your opening crawl having trade politics slowly scroll up the screen? I remember actually when Phantom Menace first came out, there was a friend of mine I used to work with, and he got a pirated copy of it before it was at the cinema, and he gave me a copy and said, there you go, there's a pirated copy. And I'm like, I don't want it. This is going to be the movie event of the century. I want to see it at the cinema in all its glory. I still think that's one of my worst life choices, not actually watching that pirated copy and saving myself the sort of feeling of dull, numb confusion I had when I came out the cinema, thinking, was that it? Why was Anakin Skywalker so annoying?
It's the only Star Wars Blu-ray that I own that has never been watched.
Yeah, I was the same. I bought that big six disc collector set, and I never watched it. And the interesting thing is, you can actually watch the Star Wars saga without having to watch it, because nothing that happens in it has any real bearing on anything else that happens in the other films.
I'll take that. I'll live with that. I'll accept that. I'm good.
Right, and on that note, before anyone brings up anything else that depresses me, we will leave it there. Thank you very much, gents, and hopefully see you next time.
Cheers, Iain. See you later.
See you later,
guys.
You're all clear, kid. Now let's blow this thing and go home.
And that was the roundtable discussion for our Star Wars episode. We hope you enjoyed it. Join us next time when we'll be talking horror and taking a look at Vampire the Masquerade, the granddaddy of angsty games everywhere. We're a monthly podcast about RPG history. Please find us on Twitter at SavePodcast, or if you want to get in contact us with email, please mail us at roll.2.save.pod@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook by searching for Roll to Save. And if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to us and leave us a rating on your podcast directory of choice. They all help. Thanks very much, and we'll see you next time.